Okay. Um, I've told you several times earlier that I've had a really happy childhood, Sharon, and that has helped me turn into what I am today. And the credit for that, all right, I've had a really happy childhood, Sharon, and a large part of the credit for that should go to my father. And of course, large and significant, how do they weigh against each other? I was going to say my mother had a significant role to play as well. But let me first talk about my father. And when I begin to talk about him, the first thing that comes to mind is how he let me and my sisters be. One of the reasons, of course, was that he was so committed to his work. It was a 12-hour job for him. He'd go to work at 9 in the morning and come back no earlier than 9 in the evening for full 12 hours. And when he came back, of course, it wasn't so much whether we studied anything at school or how well we did at the exams, etc., that he was interested in. It was his commitment to his work that, you know, manifested itself even in these evening interactions he had with us. After he came back home, we'd have dinner together, and both at the dinner table and after dinner, the things that we talked about were business-oriented things, because my father managed a hardware shop for non-resident owners. When I say non-resident, doesn't mean they were outside India. They were within Kerala itself, but they were not resident in that town. They appointed my father to manage this business, and that was it. So he was a salaried employee, but the way he looked after this business, it was more than that. It was as if it was a family business he had to nurture. So even when he came home, it was always about his day at the shop. It was a hardware shop. How he had to send people around for an urgent deposit into the bank to meet certain obligations, how he had to send someone to the railway station to pay what is called a demurrage for unclaimed goods and things like that. So I'm very familiar with business vocabulary, but to take any lesson out of this, I would say it was the commitment to your job, your vocation, that was easily imprinted in all of us, my 6 sisters and me. If you want to use philosophical terms for this, it would be what people would call karma yoga. I mean, he saw his life as that of doing something, as one of action. And that certainly has left a deep impression on me about my relationship to my work and to this establishment that lets me work. It's way beyond, the master-servant kind of relationship, where more often than not the servant just looks at the end of the month remuneration, and the rest of the month he or she attempts to, spends all the time blaming the master, etc. My father, of course, his employers were really, really benevolent employers. They not only trusted him, but they respected him. And what they got in return was 10 times that. And the kind of commitment and the kind of karma yoga he displayed. And if I hadn't absorbed even a tenth of that, I would have wasted my childhood. So if people say, is that what he talked about? Shouldn't he have talked about you, your growing up, your school and all that? Why did he talk about business? I'd say that's the best lesson I've had from my father. how, even if it's not your business, you don't have a personal stake in it, it's what you are committed to. And therefore, I'm never bothered about how much I'm paid for this job. I'm paid a decent salary now, even when it wasn't so decent in long ago. I've always felt that I'm doing my job, I'm getting enough to live, a decent life, and that's all I need to know. I don't need anything more. And that I've imbibed from my father. I must tell you that there was a rather traumatic event in his professional life where the shop, either because someone did this deliberately or because of a short circuit, caught fire, and it was a lot of inflammables inside, paints and things like that, and nothing could be saved. When this happened at the dead of the night, that's why there is still a feeling that someone might have done it, because someone was sacked just before that. And it's possible to light something and throw it in through the ventilator. When he was woken up and told about this, he just ran into the room where he kept the keys of the shop, grabbed the bag, just pulled on a shirt and started running towards the shop when he had to be physically held back by people saying, "There's nothing you can do." And he, of course, must have realized this if he were in a saner moment, that anything retrievable there would be weighing a few hundred kilos. And he was alone, and he was going to retrieve some of this. And that, I was very young then, and it left such a deep impression on me. Here's someone who was just willing to jump into a fire for someone else, and the shop was insured. So, jump into the fire to retrieve a paint can here or some turpentine bottle there. Not that he could have done anything with the heavier things. I said, if that's what he gets, and in those days he was paid perhaps 500 rupees or something per month, decent enough in those days, let's not hide that fact. But if someone is capable of being so selfless towards the work, and then what am I doing if I'm not imbibing some of those lessons? Which has always guided me in my relationship to my work and to this institution, that it's not just a paymaster, it's not just something I derive material benefits from, and therefore this may be conscious or unconscious. I haven't asked for even a refill from the stores here, Shirul. All those things were available to us. I could ask for paper, I could ask for refills, I could ask for pens. I asked for nothing except when the computers came in and I had to ask for discs and things like that. They were pretty expensive. And I've always been guided by this wonderful attitude my father had towards work. And that's what I've learned from him. Vis-a-vis my education and my sister's education, he didn't even bother to check our marks. He had to sign the progress card, as it's called. We called it report. And because only the father mattered in those days. So he had to sign it, and he didn't bother to look at the marks. He signed it, and he had a beautiful handwriting and signature, both Malayalam and English, were beautiful. Someone called it kuru kuru kuru. It was loops within loops within loops. And the signature was something to behold. And we just looked at the signature and handed it back to Sister Theophila and company, saying, "Here, take your pound of flesh." The lesson I take from that is that he not just trusted us to take care of ourselves, both our physical and intellectual growth. The physical, he must have left it to my mother, and she was quite capable of that. But the intellectual growth, he must have said, okay, these people can take care of themselves. And we did. Each of us did. So he wasn't hands-off in that sense. I would like to see it as a situation where we were allowed to grow with no agenda fixed for us. And there I must talk about my mother's participation in this and subscription to this philosophy that children should be allowed to grow on their own. That perhaps was the philosophy of all the parents in those days, that children really didn't need being guided along certain routes of professional growth, etc. These days people only worry about that, not even the personal growth of the child. And my parents, like most of the parents I'd like to believe in those days, gave us all the freedom that psychologists now say children lack. The humanistic kind of philosophy, for instance, which says children should learn on their own and develop into what their potential suggests they should develop into. We saw that in action. And I must say that this continued, this kind of an atmosphere was available to me also in my second school. Should we stop there?